6 games matching ranked opponents, 3 games featuring teams 5-0 or better, and perhaps there's an upset lurking in a place where you would least expect it. This is the College Game Day podcast for Friday, October 14th, the day that we make picks. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and the great Bill Connelly joining us. So, Bill, I've been reading your columns and noting things before we dive into picks here. So, you want to come on the podcast and make a full apology to Texas now? Or are you going to do the same to SC? Where do we stand on the SP Plus apology meter?
Yeah, I mean, USC, I'm okay with USC. They overachieved early like I expected them to, but they've pretty much leveled off. I think it's got a pretty good read of them right now. But Texas, the Texas Tech loss kind of throws us off the scent, and it also reminds us that they've been terrible in close games under Sarkisian so far. And small samples, we don't know if that's real or not just yet. And it can still trip them up. But just down for down, drive for drive, they have been incredible this season. It took so much for them to lose the Texas Tech game in terms of 6 for 8 on 4th downs for Texas Tech, all that stuff that Tech does, and they really were. Bama's equal for the most part as well, even after their quarterback got hurt. So they've been really, really, really good. In my Monday column, I had a piece on there saying, we all scoffed at FPI's projections come out and Texas is like 7th or whatever. And then it turns out they've actually been one of the 7 or so best teams on paper, at least. So, yeah. I'm
not going to lie about this. I'm scared to death. Wednesday, Pete knows the bold prediction I made is that Texas is going to be the team that when selection day comes on that Sunday, that they're going to be sitting there probably 5 or 6. That was my bold prediction. And the one that everybody's saying, oh boy, like USC in 2016, you don't want any part of them right now. That said, I am scared to death that they will cough up some, inexplicable Iowa State maybe on Saturday, some game that they shouldn't. Lose a close game, botch a game at the end because they've got a significant track record over the last year and a half of doing that, blowing double-digit leads, spitting up games right at the end, not making the plays to finish games. But they look real to me in terms of the way they play. Yeah.
And after Iowa State, it's at Oklahoma State and at Kansas State. And we're still in that whole for the last time as Big 12 members kind of run here. And those are 2 intense crowds anyway. So they have their way. If they're really not very good in close games, if they're going to figure out more ways to kind of screw those games up, they've got plenty of those games left. And so it could fall apart, but man, they've been good.
Pete, how did you do last week in your picks?
I actually don't know.
I
was curious about that. We have to have some kind of scorecard that we can sort of peek at. I don't think I was terrible. I did win my lock because I got Ohio State at a good price. I think I had them at 27.5 and they won by 28, and the line ended up around 31. It got bet up. So I was glad that we locked that in on Wednesday. But I think I was not as terrible in my mind. Taylor, would you agree with that?
Yeah. So we had our first push of the season, which was interesting. With the line for TCU Kansas was TCU -7. It got bet to 7.5 after the fact, but so that was our first push of the year. Let's see, Pete and Rece both 4, 3, and 1, and then Bill 3, 4, and 1. Pardon me. So
thanks Oklahoma, Bill. Thanks Oklahoma.
That's right.
What about the locks? Is that included in the record?
That is included in the record. So last week, you guys, Rece and Pete, you guys both hit your locks. Rece, you had Clemson, Pete, Ohio State. Bill missed on his with Auburn.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I was Auburn scores that late touchdown. I'm like, see, this was perfect. I said 24-28, and then Georgia scored again and blew it all up.
Man, that's a difficult situation there. You know what? We talk about upsets every week. You know what the biggest upset of the season is to this point? This one's easy.
By number, what is the biggest upset of the season?
No, that's not what I asked. The biggest upset of the season is that Wisconsin has fired his coach and Auburn hasn't.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, man. You would have got long odds on that. I mean, that you are 1,000%, 1,000% correct. So,
Pete, what do you have on this game that we're not going to pick? But this might be a something has to give game. Rutgers and Indiana. Why? Because after beating Nebraska, teams are 1-12, and no Power 5 team has a win after beating Nebraska. Georgia Southern has one, but they're 1-3. So maybe something has to give, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe this is a lock for Indiana because everybody loses after they beat Nebraska, and Rutgers hasn't done that yet. So, give me a quick pick there that won't even count.
My favorite part of this game is that it is nice to see the Big Ten acting like the SEC. All right. You have the Paul Christ firing, which was straight out of like an Auburn coordinator fever dream in the Tuberville era, right?
Tony Franklin packing boxes on a Sunday.
There you go. There you go. And then you have, you have Rutgers firing its offensive coordinator on Sunday, and Indiana firing its offensive line coach, installing Rod Carey. Rutgers obviously took former interim Nunzio Campanelli will take over the reins of the Rutgers offense this week. So you have the shakeup game here. You have two totally different feels coming from these two offenses. But it does speak trend wise. Those types of pressures didn't exist when you were a lower tier conference team 20 years ago. Because financially you're in a completely different sphere. You can fire Sean Gleason, pay him about $1.5 million to go away, and bring in somebody new because there is that pressure. I mean, look, Rutgers had back-to-back. And again, I know Mickey Joseph mocked the sellout, but they had back-to-back great crowds and like real-looking environments for Iowa and Nebraska. So you could the fan base wanted results, and there was a pressure to produce them for Greg Schiano. So
have you guys ever been to a concert where there was maybe a superstar act coming, and then the opening act was brutal?
Oh yeah.
Sure.
You've done well. That's what we're doing right now. We're talking about Rutgers in Indiana.
You just dropped a little Rutgers Indiana nugget in front of me with no preparation. So
it's my fault. I brought it up. I mean, it's my fault. I brought it up. So boo. Let's boo Rutgers and Indiana off the stage. And Taylor, let's make some selections for this monumental game on Saturday. And by the way, that one's on me. So I never should have brought it up. But I did like the little nugget. I wanted to make sure we got that in this week.
15-yard penalty for bad hosting.
Hey, don't get carried away there, Rook. Come on. What do you got, Taylor?
If we're issuing apologies here, I think Pete deserves to issue one to the Red River rivalry. I kind of lost the picks last week. I had to do some audio archaeology to find everyone's picks. And last week, Pete is like, this will not be a blowout. No chance it'll be a blowout. So I thought that was interesting.
Did I really?
Yes, you did. It was quite funny to listen to.
But you didn't pick Oklahoma.
I picked Texas.
You did? No, you did pick Texas, but I'm just saying you were talking about the game in general. You just said
the game in general had not been a blowout. So that would have been why I might have. Look, I mean, if anyone's listened to our Friday pod this season, they know they're going to get bad predictions from me. So,
that's for sure.
It was just a funny snapshot of the moment.
No, please. I will take all the bad prediction vitriol. I deserve it. I was just glad I got it right.
There are no laughing moments or bad predictions in the race for the ribeye. Loser has to buy the winner's ribeyes at the end of the season because we believe in steak and steaks on this
Who's
podcast.
in the lead?
Who is in the lead?
So right now, actually this past weekend, amongst the three of you, Bill and Rece tied at 28 and 34. And
oh, geez.
3 games
So this is basically people are listening to Indiana Rutgers.
Yeah. In terms of picks. I think it's quite valuable. People listen. Maybe they'll get a few nuggets where, the things that we are good at that we can share with them. And then they can say, well, I can make some money by going against these guys' picks. So
we'd have to figure out a tiebreaker here for when we all tie at like 10 games under 500.
Yeah, that would be
figure out how we're going to break that.
Consult the Big 12 office. They're really good at those.
They're open for business. All right, Taylor, let's have
that was a good line in the show, by the way, Rece. I caught that.
Pete interviewed Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, and I think I threw it to him saying, referencing open for business or something.
Put a smile on my face.
Yeah. Did Brett laugh?
I think he did.
Notice
Yeah, I think he did.
Okay, good.
I was just about to like start. It was sort of like an awkward kickover, and I'm like not a natural host like you, so I was like pretty focused on like not screwing it up. So I wasn't like probably as engaged with him interpersonally as I should have been. But
yeah, look, I mean, you're crushing it. I mean, you want to talk about straight up arrows straight up on. I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm not making fun. I like to joke around with Pete and everything, but the information obviously is ultra elite, and it has been forever. But the on-air capabilities, stellar. Actually improving every time, every rep. Mark of a smart guy and talented guy. That's what it is.
Well, thank Trish for the tie knots. That's really where the difference has been made since week 1.
Well,
so.
it's important. It's an important thing. You don't want to go out there looking like you don't know what you're doing. So with tie knots and stuff. All right, Taylor, for the third time, I've asked you for games and I keep interrupting you. So talkative and undisciplined. That's the subtitle of this, of every podcast that we do. Give us a game to pick.
All right. Penn State going to the big house. Michigan, a 7-point favorite. Let's go Rece, Pete, Bill.
This is the game that on Wednesday on the podcast, I said I was grinding over a lot. Michigan leads the nation in completion percentage, so it's almost silly to, say that you're wondering about their passing game. I mean, there's been a lot of talk. McCarthy even talked about it in the news conference this week about downfield shots and things of that nature. Corum has been as good as any running back in the country, but Penn State's going to be hard to run on in that situation. I think this is a close defensive game. I think Penn State's a little bit better than maybe they're getting credit for, and I think this is the first all-around test for Michigan. Michigan's offense certainly had a test in playing Iowa, but the all-around test for them. I'm going to take Penn State in the points because it's a full touchdown. So I'll go with the underdog on the belief that this is going to be a very close game.
We chatted about this a little bit on Wednesday's pod. The history of Penn State going to Ann Arbor, COVID excluded, really scares me. That James Franklin has laid a few dinosaur eggs in this, in this series. If you go back to 2018, 2016. So that said, I think I'm going to take Penn State in the points too, because this Michigan team to me reminds me of like an NFL style team that is designed to win and not win pretty. And I watched a bunch of that Indiana game on Saturday, and they eventually did pull away at the end. But there are some like Ferencian Wisconsin like fundamentals that this Michigan team, as it shifted stylistically last season to much success, has adopted and taken. So I think that Michigan is going to struggle to run the ball. Look, Michigan's numbers are hard to digest because they've come against such poor competition. Now, you can knock Auburn, as a Penn State game, but at least there was like intent there, and they had to go to a hostile environment and win. And they also have gone to Purdue, which is a very good team, and they gone there and they figured out a way to win. So they are actually road tested. They are going to be able to control the ball. They are going to be able to control Michigan's rush attack. I feel very strongly about that. So I don't know if Penn State's going to win, but I think they're going to hang around. I think we're going to hopefully see more than 12 carries for Nick Singleton. That's what he's averaging a game. And I think if Penn State is going to go there and win, he's going to have a breakthrough, supernova kind of performance. And I trust Sean Clifford managing games on the road, winning, not making the big mistake, right? Like, I don't think they will dumb lose this game. So I will take the Nittany Lions. And you know what? Just for fun, just to be a little different, I'm going to take them to win outright.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not going to surprise me. I do think Penn State is better than they get credit for so far. And part of that's their own fault. Like, they messed around with Central Michigan for a while. It was a big sloppy game against Northwestern, and they didn't have to take all that many chances because they knew they were going to win, but it still wasn't very impressive. So I think Penn State's better, and I'm going to take Michigan because of the matchups. I think in the end, This is my biggest concern with Penn State is along the line of scrimmage. I do think they've improved in run defense, and so maybe Michigan can't get away with just at whatever they want there, even though they've been super efficient running the ball. But I'm really concerned about the fact that Penn State's offensive line, I just still don't think it's very good. And Michigan has really lived up to, like, all the turnover they suffered last year. They've been pretty much dominant when it comes to the run defense. And if this is a situation where there are a lot of 2nd and 9s and 3rd and 8s, and Sean Clifford is having to make plays, and that pass rush, they don't blitz a lot, but when they do, they get there. And so I feel like this is just a bad matchup for Penn State, and Michigan wins by 10-14 because of it. But I am excited because we're going to learn a lot about Penn State. And the other thing that brings me comfort here is, Michigan runs the ball really well, but they last week that wasn't going as well as they thought. They basically asked JJ McCarthy to go win them the game in the second half, and he went like 15 for 17 passing. So I think there's upside that they're still tapping, and in the end, they take this one comfortably.
I think what you really want to see is whether Penn State, which they've been really good at creating turnovers and not giving that many of them away, but will they turn it over a couple of times so Michigan can break out the turnover buffs on the sidelines? You guys seen those? The Cartier glasses that cost, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000, how much ever they cost. When you get one, that's their thing. They go put on the turnover buffs. That's what the glasses are called.
Interesting.
They asked Harbaugh about it in the news conference this week, and he's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And they're like, "Oh, the sunglasses." And it was like, "Oh yeah." He said he loved them. So, but both these teams have pretty good turnover margins anyway. I just wanted to mention the turnover buffs thing. You imagine that $3,000 pair of sunglasses on the sidelines of a football game? That's
I do believe that Jim
disaster.
Harbaugh didn't know what they were called, though.
I didn't either when they first came out. I knew the sunglasses, but I didn't know that's what they were called. So I educated myself on that. What do you got, Taylor?
Kansas going to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, a 9-point favorite. I feel like this hinges on
Look at Bill's face.
Kansas's quarterback health. Does Pete Thamel have any information on that? We'll go Pete, Bill, Rece.
I do have some information on that. Kansas quarterback Jalen Daniels is doubtful for the game on Saturday. I don't expect him to play. There was a report that emerged on Tuesday night that said he was out for the year. That was pushed back on by Jalen Daniels himself on Twitter with a vicious little subtweet. He said it was news to him. So parsing all these, all the different information here, I really feel like Jalen Daniels is hurt of some significance. It's been the year of the shoulder injury, right? I feel like we've had shoulder sprains, AC joints. It's been a little bit of an unfortunate theme this year for some of the more talented signal callers in college football. It sounds like Jalen Daniels is going to be out for a while, but maybe not for the season. So now what is a while? Is that 2 weeks? Is that 3 weeks? I don't know. But like this is not something that he is going to bounce immediately back from, maybe as some had hoped. So that said, I'm going to start here. Like, there is no way I am picking Oklahoma as a favorite ever. Just the way that defense is played. It has been a disorganized, disheveled mess. They're not playing with any distinct or discernible spirit. I mean, Kansas almost won this game last year with a much different roster, culture, etc. I think the one thing we have seen from Jason Bean is that he's played a lot of football. He certainly, that throw he threw in the back of the end zone to in sort of the back and forth. I mean, he's made some monster plays. Like, I have full confidence in him gaining yards and moving the ball, using Andy Kotelnicki's scheme, which has been one of the best in the sport this year. And there's enough dynamism for Kansas at the receiver position and at the backs, even with Hinshaw's injury, to keep moving the ball. So I think Kansas slows, and I'm not naive to think that Jalen Daniels isn't going to be a loss. But Oklahoma has a vote of no confidence from me every time they show up from this point out, certainly as a 9-point favorite. So no thanks. I need to think of like the principle to call this. but it's basically like, and this has been probably why my picks are so bad. I would not enjoy watching the game on Saturday if I needed Oklahoma to win by a certain. I would be so mad at myself. I would just be like, what are you doing, you moron? So I'm just going to take Kansas. And look, I hope for Oklahoma's sake, those kids have been downtrodden. Like, I hope they show up and have some pulse and some heartbeat, but I am not going to count on them doing it.
I kind of shocked myself in my Monday column because I knew OU had underachieved, like 3 straight games have underachieved dramatically. And I knew to kind of look it up, like how bad is this historically? And it's basically against that closing line, they've underachieved by 98 points in the last 3 games. It was a decent amount against Kansas State, and then there was a ton against TCU and a ton against Texas as well. 98 points in the last 30 years, only 4 teams, once ranked teams that had some sort of expectation, had underachieved by more. The most was 97 Texas, and that included the 66-3 UCLA game, but then also a couple more. 2011 Texas Tech fell apart down the stretch and probably should have fired Tuberville, but then they kept him, and and then they fell apart the next year too, and then he sneaked out the back door of that restaurant to go to Cincinnati. 99 UCLA, after they had a couple top 10 finishes, they fell apart really quickly under Bob Toledo. And 2005 Colorado late in the year with Gary Barnett. So basically 2 teams that fired their coaches, 2 others, or 2 that fired their coaches and 2 others that should have. That's not a great list to be on when you're a first-year coach. The first-year coaches list was worse. The only first-year coaches that have had a stretch like this in the last 30 years are Turner Gill at Kansas, Brian Knorr at Ohio, Vic Kenning at Wyoming, Paul Wolf at Washington State, and Ron Dickerson at Temple. Basically 5 of the least successful hires of the last 30 years. That's
a Star Wars bar you just described of fired coaches. No, by the way, we talked about this on our podcast on Monday. We nicknamed you Caveat Connelly because it was like that was like a quintessential statistic for you, Bill, where you're like, well, if you take this and you take this and you take this, this is the list. So, but it was eye-opening. We're certainly not, it was eye-opening.
It floored me. I knew to look into it. I did not know that those were the names.
How do you do that, Bill? I know this isn't why people are like, how do you put together a list like that?
Well, we have for gambling stuff, we actually our chalk team has like just a giant spreadsheet of going back to 1978. And I end up calling on that quite a bit because it's just really cool. And you can come up with tidbits. I love the tidbits, but all this said, like, I know why they're still favored by 9, because Vegas, just like SP Plus, Vegas has no idea how to handle a team that has collapsed this quickly. But I think one of the other teams that was up there was like 27 Ball State, where they basically just they hit their head on every single step on the way down. Like, they didn't stop collapsing for a while after that 3-game span. So I cannot pick Oklahoma until I know they're done collapsing. And so
what are your numbers
with the backup quarterback on the road, right at 9, just like the spread, like 9.4. Yeah. So yeah, it's impossible to actually figure this game out, but I'm not picking Oklahoma again. I'm not doing what I did last week until I know they're done.
This looks like
principle
basically this looks like one of those things where they're begging you. They're begging you to take Kansas, which often leads me to the great Lee Corso. Somebody knows something, and I'm going with the somebodies, but I ain't going with the somebodies here. I mean, Oklahoma's going to look a lot better if Dylan Gabriel is ready to go, and they'll put up some points. I'm well documented. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a really, really good player. And certainly they don't have a backup option that they trust, which, I have my own thoughts about the way they handled that, to be honest with you. I thought it was pretty bad. And it makes me wonder about just the overall buy-in if the transition is going that smoothly. I'm not worried about Venables. I think he's going to be a terrific head coach. I still believe in the hire, but this was a roster that was challenged in many areas to begin with, and they probably fooled us out of the gate a little bit, but they have been so bad, particularly on defense, and Kansas with Bean, as great as Daniels was, they didn't miss much of a step. So if I'm getting points, are you kidding? I'm taking Kansas. That's an easy one, but it feels like with all three of us taking Kansas and somebody knowing something, and Oklahoma being embarrassed, there is some power in that after being embarrassed the way they were last week to respond. But I'm still taking Kansas, man. No way around it.
Yeah, somebody can enjoy watching the game knowing what they know. I'm not going to have that pit in my stomach.
Yeah, right.
Fine.
Super interesting game out in the Big Ten West. Minnesota, a 6.5-point favorite heading to Illinois. Let's go, Bill, Rece, Pete.
Illinois defense is so good. They out Iowa last weekend, and they can actually sort of run the ball. Like obviously when you only have one weapon and is your running back, like that's only going to get you so far. But they've been pretty legit, and they're up to, I think, 34th in my SP Plus rankings. Very, very solid shot of doing some damage moving forward too. I'm just going to, now that Mo Ibrahim's back for Minnesota, I'm just going to pretend the Purdue game didn't happen. I'm just going to kind of revert to my previous assumptions about Minnesota overall. Their defense is very good, almost as good as Illinois' on paper, at least. And their offense just has a lot more to offer, even with the receiver injury still screwing things up for them. I think now that Ibrahim's back, especially, I just think Minnesota's better. So we're going to go, let's see. So what did we say the line was, like 6.5? Yes. My numbers say like 4.5, but I'm going to lean into that and just assume that it's like a 7 to 10 kind of range instead. I think I trust Minnesota.
I picked Minnesota in the preseason to win the Big Ten West, and I was really disappointed by their performance against Purdue. Road game, this has all the makings of being one of those where you take the points because you think it's going to be a close game. Illinois is ranked for the first time in 11 years. Their defense, as you mentioned, has been sensational. But I don't want to be bouncing all over the place in support of Big Ten West teams or belief in Big Ten West teams. I'll take the Purdue game, like you, Bill, as a bit of an aberration. Ibrahim being back will be a big deal. Illinois has some question at quarterback, although Art Sikowski, he's been in college football for 100 years too, so it's not like they're rolling somebody out there that hasn't played. If DeVito and Pete may have something on that, but if DeVito's not able to go, they've still got a capable and experienced backup. But I'm gonna go with Minnesota and lay it because I still think they're the best team in the Big Ten West.
So this is a great audition for potential Broyles Awards winners. Joe Rossi at Minnesota and Ryan Walters at Illinois. When you look at the defensive categories in college football, total defense, Minnesota 1, Illinois 3. Passing yards allowed, Minnesota 2. Scoring defense, Illinois 1, Minnesota 2. So credit those guys for just sort of turning those units. And Walters did it in pretty quick fashion.
Yeah.
To two of the better units in the whole sport. And look, they have great personnel. Illinois has great personnel in the front seven. Minnesota has sort of found a nice blend of like portal guys to fill in their defensive line to do it. So at the risk of gifting Illinois a victory here in an upset, I am going to take Minnesota because that was my conviction coming in. It is a big number. I'd be really curious what the over-under is in this game because I would think it would have to be one of the lower numbers of the season. But I like Tanner Morgan managing the game. I like Ibrahim back, and I just think Minnesota is a cut above Illinois talent-wise right now, and I think they can score 17 points in cover.
39.5 is the over-under currently.
It's a pretty low number. That would have to be among the 10 lowest in the sport this year, I would guess. I don't have access to your spreadsheet, but I would think that's there can't be a lot in the 30s, right?
I'm going to make a quick prediction here.
Yeah.
I predict that Kirk Herbstreit will take Illinois as his super dog on Sunday.
He loves him some Burt Bielema.
He loves Burt, and we say that affectionately and on purpose. We all know it's Brett, but I do too. But that's a prediction. Yeah. That's a prediction. We'll see if that. Do I get extra credit, Taylor, if that actually comes to be on the show Saturday? And I haven't spoken
Yes.
to Kirk about this. I never do. Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, DeVito, by the way, for those listening, pay attention close to kick. Old Bird is being a little mischievous with his status.
All right. The Ting in your Tang game of the week. Alabama, 7.5-point favorite. Headed to Rocky Top. Rece, you're going to lead us off, and you promised this might be the best atmosphere in college football this season earlier in the week. You stand by that?
Yes, it's going to be the most vitriolic atmosphere. Loud is relative. It will be deafening no matter what, but the intensity and emotion in that stadium will be the best in the sport all year. And it'll exceed Florida, I think, because of the generations of disdain between those two programs. There's really not a lot of reason, based on the way Alabama has played most of the year, not that it's been bad, but in terms of really being eager to lay a bunch of points. Tennessee is better on run defense than you think. And Alabama has had to rely on Jahmyr Gibbs. He's their best receiver and their best running back, but rely on him in the running game a little bit more than you might expect with Bryce Young at quarterback, because Alabama's drop percentage in terms of drop passes is among the 15-16 worst in the nation, dropping about 9% of the passes.
Wow.
So that's their drop rate is it's actually worse than that. It's 126 in the country. And so they've had some issue at receiver. So they've had to rely on the running game a little bit, and Tennessee's good on run defense. But they do have some experience against the pace and the tempo, and they really slowed down Tennessee last year with the exception of a couple of explosives. Tennessee will get those. Because everybody on the planet, I think, is expecting the breakthrough, I'm going to take Alabama and lay the points.
Me or Bill? Sorry.
Little
League, I missed the batting order.
It's Pete. You, Pete.
Well, I guess I'm going to niche myself like everyone on the planet. I feel like Tennessee hangs in. I feel like this is a close one of those SEC games that starts in the light and ends at dark, and the drama just sort of comes with the setting sun. I really feel like we are on the cusp of an epic game on Saturday, and I feel like the difference in this game, and it'll be a really fascinating conundrum for Alex Golesh, the play caller for Tennessee. How much do they run Hendon Hooker? Because that, forever and a day, quarterback run game has been the great equalizer, and you're going to have to get him out of the pocket some to get him away from Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. So can they use the quarterback run game as that extra option? Obviously, pay attention close to kick about Cedric Tillman's status. Obviously, we're going to keep our eyes on Bryce Young, but we're operating as if he's playing in that game. But I really feel like Hooker's legs are going to be the difference in what I see being a tight sort of teeth gnash game. I don't yet trust Alabama's corners. So for Brew McCoy and for Jalen Hyatt, I feel like there's going to be some spots and some gaps for them to just create enough damage for some havoc. And let's say Tennessee hangs in there and at the very least keeps it close. Worth noting, the ghosts of Alabama kickers past, the ghoulish Boobaluses, reappeared last week for the Crimson Tide. And I certainly don't have to remind people of that sordid history. So worth noting.
It took them 3 or 4 years to get to Will Reichard, but they're always coming, aren't they?
Yes. That's that. Insert bad Halloween joke here.
It was almost surprising when A&M didn't score on that final play, because just the upset script had just been followed so rigorously for so long with the missed field goals and everything else. Like, it just felt like, okay, this is actually going to happen. No, that's a good point about the QB run game. That was something I wanted to mention about Sean Clifford in the Penn State Michigan game too. He's barely run all year, and you wonder if that maybe changes in the big games. But I think Tennessee is just really good. I'm going to assume that if Bryce Young is healthy enough to be Bryce Young, that Alabama figures out a way to win. But it's not going to surprise me at all if it's in the 3 or 4 point neighborhood, because Tennessee is just, it felt like every single week early in the season was the caveat of, I know, we're doing this again, and Tennessee's going to fall apart at some point. But they've kind of earned until they do. Like they've earned my trust at this point. So I'm gonna pick Tennessee to cover. They do defend the run really, really well. The pass, not so much. They can be pretty inefficient, pretty passive in that regard, and just hoping that their pass rush gets to the quarterback. But no, I feel pretty good about that one, even if I still think Alabama's going to win.
The most overlooked ranked matchup of the day, Oklahoma State at TCU. TCU, a 4-point favorite. Let's go Pete, Bill, Rece.
Well, I fresh off seeing my football man crush, Quentin Johnston, have the breakout that I too long predicted to happen. His 14 catch, 200 plus yard evisceration in Lawrence last week. I am feeling bullish about my Frogs, and vindicated that one thing I actually said would happen came true this year. So I feel the need to point that out because it might not happen again. I just am scared by Oklahoma's pass defense numbers. And I know you can, sort of chop it down to efficiency and look at total yards, and they had some blowouts, so teams are passing and all that stuff. But when you're 104th in total defense and you are 126th in passing yards allowed, I just don't like the tenor of that matchup for TCU. So I just think like we've learned a lot about Oklahoma here the last couple of weeks. They showed some guts against Tech, coming back the way they did. They went toe-to-toe with Baylor and won, which has turned into a sneaky good little Big 12 rivalry, kind of a ghost of Big 12 future rivalry. I really feel like TCU in this moment at home should be able to figure out ways to fillet that defense. And I think we're going to see a little bit of like missing Jim Knowles in all this. So I am going to take the Horned Frogs to run away from the Pokes.
I love the SP Plus projection in this game was Oklahoma State 32.2, TCU 32.19. Just like the perfect tie pretty much. So I'm going to pick Oklahoma State. I'm going to take that hint and pick Oklahoma State. It is very noteworthy though, that as often as not in this series, it's not a close game. Like it's gone back and forth. I think they split the last 8, but there have been a lot of 14, 21, 40 something point wins in this series. And I think that could happen one way or the other in this one too, because basically each team has one major weakness each. TCU gives up too many big plays and Oklahoma State gives up too many big plays. So like haymakers flying for 60 minutes in this one, and it's possible that one of them gets up and then just keeps landing those big shots, but I don't know who that's going to be. So I'm going to ride the tie logic there and go with Oklahoma State.
I'm going with Oklahoma State as well. I mentioned on Wednesday, this is the first Big 12 conference game matching teams 5-0 or better since 2015, when it was TCU and Oklahoma State. That has nothing to do with this game other than the fact that it shows that with acknowledgement of the little slip that TCU's had the last couple of years, these two programs have been really solid for the last several years. They've been really good. They've been contenders, and now TCU's in a new regime, and Sonny Dykes is sort of changing the culture. And maybe I'm just or not culture, but the way they go about things in terms of being an offensive juggernaut. Really impressed. They looked the part on the hoof. I mean, they were impressive walking by the set on Saturday as they took the field against Kansas. They looked the part of a conference championship contending team at the Power 5 level. Maybe I just need to see a little bit more to maybe we're not quite to the Sonny Dykes fade portion of the season just yet. Maybe that's not a real thing. Maybe they were just a confluence of circumstances that caused it. But I'm going to go Oklahoma State. They kind of find ways. They make big plays when they need to. They get enough stops. They sort of know who they are.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to go with the Pokes and say that they really have the first statement of the season. They've had some good wins, but this one will be a big one, and people will have to sit up and take notice of them. I'm going to go with the Cowpokes.
Our next game is NC State headed to Central New York to face Syracuse. Syracuse, a 3.5-point favorite. Our order here is Bill, Rece, Pete. But from Pete, I really want to hear about all your Syracuse friends trying to game out how they can get game day because it's going on in the ESPN offices and I cannot make it stop. And it's really irritating me.
So I have sources close to the unrealistic revolution that you are speaking of. The Syracuse fans try to trick game day in Syracuse into existence. They're trying to speak it into existence. And again, I've made very clear on this podcast that I have less than zero say on where game day goes. But I was with fair confidence that it was not going to go to Central New York for this game. Now, I am excited that Syracuse is going to be a bit of a hub of activity. Like, we're picking their game. They're undefeated. They're hosting a relevant ranked matchup in mid-October. So for that fan base, which endured Greg Robinson, for that fan base that endured most of the Dino Babers era, other than the 10-win season, for the fan base that just kind of watched them slog post Paul Pasqualoni, this is being billed as the biggest home game in 20 years. So I am generally excited about that. I do not think the game day realities that were tried to spoke into existence actually had any legitimate sourcing behind
them. I guess this is just a trust game, really. Like, from a numbers standpoint, if you ignore everything that happened before 2022, Syracuse ranks 15th right now in points per drive and 18th in points allowed per drive. NC State ranks 17th in points allowed and 72nd in points because their offense just stinks. And I was concerned about the hype Devin Leary was getting and about the hype that NC State was getting, because I just didn't know if we could trust their offense. It's been quite a bit worse than I expected. So in theory, this all points to Syracuse, but I think of all these units that are playing really well right now, the only one I completely trust is NC State, because they've done it more than the last month, basically. So I guess I don't feel good about it. I pick either way in this game, but I guess I'm going to lean NC State just because they're getting those points. And we'll see. But this is a Rondé Gadsden emerging. Rondé Gadsden the second emerging for Syracuse was a humongous deal, because obviously they had Sean Tucker, and obviously Garrett Schrader is coming along, but he needed a go-to to step up. And when they needed big plays against both Purdue and Virginia, they looked to Gadsden, and I think that was huge. Having two huge weapons instead of one is a massive difference. So I should trust Syracuse by now, but I'm going to give it one more week, and I'm going to pick NC State.
NC State's offense has been maybe the most disappointing unit in the country. Now, they had some people to replace from last year, but with the return of the quarterback, and they had some questions in the running game that they actually seem to have answered to a degree. But the lack of productivity is shocking, and they can't move against good teams. They've been inefficient in the passing game. Now they're maybe on the backup quarterback. I don't know what Leary's status is, but Jack Chambers has some 400-yard games, I think, in his past. Maybe I think at Charleston Southern, if memory serves. I'm really surprised by them, and I'm a little disappointed in their rush defense too. I mean, their total over yards is not that bad, but yards per carry, they're like the bottom half of the country, just past the bottom half, and that worries me a little bit against Syracuse. There is some institutional knowledge that you sort of figure NC State will win this game, and seeing Syracuse, I'm not sure it's a legit 5-0. I mean, they sort of somehow figured out Virginia, so I'm going to go with NC State too, but I don't like this game at all in terms of making a pick. I mean, because I just don't know. I don't believe in either of them, to be honest with you. And NC State has been a little bit disappointing, if not a lot of bit disappointing.
So I've already sort of spoke quite a bit about this game. So I'm going to quickly point out a credit to Dino Babers, who I don't think I remember a head coach as drastically changing the identity of a program as Dino Babers has at Syracuse. Now, some of that was that what they were doing on offense wasn't working. The year of the not upright Tommy DeVito comes to mind, when they got sacked a bajillion times and they had the worst offensive line in football. They were terrible during the COVID year, and that was a crossroads. I mean, there's a chance Babers wouldn't still be the coach if he didn't have such a big buyout. But to his credit, he went and got a great offensive line coach in Mike Schmidt. He went out and got a great defensive coordinator in Tony White. They inserted the 3-3-5, and they basically went from a Baylor offense to a running program, right? They totally shifted their identity on offense. They totally slowed down. And the fact that Syracuse right now is number 10, I believe, in scoring defense. Let me make sure that's right here. Yes, they're number 10 in scoring defense. That to me is remarkable, adjusting to what your personnel says. Like, they basically said, you know what, we are not going to win playing Art Briles style mid-2000s football here, even though in theory in the Dome you could have done that. It wasn't happening. They had not found the right quarterback after Eric Dungy, and they had just sputtered through a period of time in the desert there. They've come out on the other side, and all credit to them, because they've come out further. So all that said, the thing I can't get over is just NC State beat them 41-17 last year in Raleigh. And I just think the class of talent in the program at NC State, generally 1-30, is much better than the class of talent at Syracuse, 1-30. So, and also, like, my eyes are still bleeding from that Virginia game, which was a lot of fun, but was not great football. So I just think NC State comes in, physically overpowers them, grinds out a 10-point win, and I don't think we should be surprised by that.
Clemson Tigers going to Tallytown, 3.5-point favorites over the Seminoles. Let's go Rece, Pete, Bill.
I'm not as down on Clemson as some people are, thinking that, they're not that they've sort of escaped it. They're not as good as they've looked or whatever. I think they're starting to look the part of contender. They've got the longest active winning streak in college football. They won 12 in a row. Florida State has not been able to win these games. They haven't won a game against a top 4 team since they won the national championship game against Auburn at the conclusion of the 2013 season. Lost their last 2 games against ranked opponents. They squandered a lead at North Carolina State. Second half, no points, 4 punts, 2 picks on their 6 possessions. There's not anything that would make you think that Florida State is ready to win a game like this, except for this. They're at home. It's their last chance. It's another mediocre season and questioning of the direction of the entire operation if they don't do something. I'm going to go with the last stand theory and say that I'll take Florida State and the points, and that's not an indictment of Clemson. I actually think Clemson is legit, and I'm not I know Uiagalelei might not be exactly what everybody thought he was going to be when he came out of high school, but he's improving and he's making enough plays to win, and he's had big moments. The performance in the clutch against Wake Forest comes to mind. I'm going to take Florida State, not because I'm totally sold, but I've got a little bit of a theme for Saturday, and some of these teams backed into a corner will come out fighting with some extra vigor, and I'll take Florida State at home and the points, and that also foreshadows our next game, I believe.
I feel like Clemson right now is good enough, right? At every test and every turn,
they have proven to be good enough. They looked pedestrian, milquetoast, average as grits in the first half against BC, and they just kind of walked all over them in the second half. They are talented enough, and their offense is functional enough. It's gone from dysfunctional to functional to be a solid team. So I am going to take Clemson in this game because I just feel like we've been waiting for this Florida State breakthrough, and I want some empirical evidence of it before I can trust them. Now, I hope that Tallahassee is rocking on Saturday. I hope that you get all the feels back and all the chops back, and you get some Charlie Ward tingles in your spine, because a vibrant Florida State makes college football a better place. It makes the ACC a better place. I'm hoping for Mike Norvell that this is that breakthrough where they stick the spear in the ground and go. But I have not seen enough, And I just keep thinking back to that their rush defense is very poor. And if Clemson's going to go win on the road, I think they're 88th in the country. Will Shipley is going to bang that rock into the line. And look, everything's good enough, right? Is Clemson's offensive line elite? Nope, but they're good enough. Are their receivers like as dynamic as they were when they had Sammy Watkins and all those freaky cats? Nope, but they're good enough. And I just think if there's one thing Dabo has shown us, he can figure out ways to win these types of games. So I think Clemson goes there and wins by a touchdown.
Yeah, I don't think I feel confident in anything over a touchdown. But what we've seen from Clemson, in just in close games of any sort over the last decade plus, they're the best in the country at that, except for Ohio State. I think I don't remember the record, something crazy, 37-7 in one score games going back to like 2012, something like that. The last chance thing is real. I do think Florida State is going to be ready, and the crowd's going to be ready, and they're going to give the best impression of themselves. But Clemson's handled a lot of those through the years, and they just kind of take some shots, and then they wipe the blood off their face, and they just calmly go about their business. And those crowds can backfire on you when you've had a couple of explosions and everything is just rolling, and this is going to be the moment, and then you realize it's not going to be the moment, and you can hear the kind of the buzz and the anxiety. So I think Clemson absorbs some punches, doesn't look good for a while, and then just, calmly goes out and wins like 28-24 or something like that. So I'm going to go, no blowout. I don't think Clemson's capable of that right now, but I think they win by at least 4.
If Clemson were to blow them out, well, the only thing I know would happen is that perhaps a certain coach in the state of Mississippi might have to make a new sweatshirt that says, "Who's ACC?" and on the back, "I'm ACC." Do you guys see Dion's sweatshirt story? There would be there might be some feelers starting to go out for bringing a former star home. I don't wish that. I like Mike Norvell. I think he's a good coach, but a blowout, not just a loss. A loss won't do that, but it would put the rest of the season in the spotlight for the Seminoles, I think, if they aren't able to win, and it certainly would if they were to get spanked on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's the rest of their schedule is just peak anxiety. If they lose to Clemson and they're now 4-3, they probably beat Georgia Tech. Obviously, Georgia Tech is a little feistier than they were a few weeks ago, but they probably handle that. But at Miami is a toss-up, at Syracuse is a potential toss-up, Florida is a potential toss-up. Like they like 6-6 and 9-3 would both be on the table pretty heavily, and those are very different things, especially when you started off 4-0.
Yeah.
Last game before we get to our locks, USC at Utah, a 3.5-point favorite. The Utes are. Let's do Pete, Bill, Rece.
Mean that one more time. Sorry, I got a little news coming in. I got a little distracted.
USC at Utah. Utah is a 3.5-point favorite.
All right. So we are at the great moment of USC litmus, of USC toughness, of all those things we were skeptical about USC for. Their great foil lies in Salt Lake City with mauling lines on both sides of the ball, hostile environment, a corner who can cover their great portal addition. It is, I'm really fascinated and there's the element of desperation. Some of that Tallahassee desperation we were just talking about is going to be sprinkled through the mountain air on Saturday. So all that said, I'm going to keep my USC skepticism, and I'm going to think Utah punches them in the mouth and figures out a way to either win or make this a close game. Now, look, maybe Caleb and the boys are really rolling right now, but if you look at kind of how Washington State ground them out until the later parts of that game, I do think there is some susceptibility still that maybe USC needs a year before it can go toe-to-toe with the old Utes. So give me Cam Rising being crafty with his legs, and give me some like non-insane turnover luck for the Trojans, because I'm not Bill, but that's been pretty insane. And I think Utah figures out a way.
Yeah, well, it's funny. This has been the game all year where, okay, finally, this is when we'll get our questions answered about USC, and then suddenly I have a lot more questions about Utah after last week. But I do think, from a matchup standpoint, I think I still trust Utah. There's only been one really, really good road test for USC. No offense, Stanford, but that's not really a thing, especially early in the year. And they struggled with Oregon State, and Utah's kind of a better Oregon State in some ways, at least, especially along the line of scrimmage. I think, USC has a great pass rush, but Cam Rising throws the ball too quick. They don't even try for big plays. They aren't good at them. They don't try for them. And I think they're going to be throwing the ball quickly enough to kind of keep USC's pass rush at bay. And then I think they're just going to still be better on the line of scrimmage. So I don't feel nearly as confident in Utah as I did a couple of weeks ago, but I think at home, where USC hasn't necessarily proven they're road warriors yet, and Utah is pretty consistently overachieves projections at home, I'm gonna still go with the Utes. But this is one of the games before the season. This is one of the games I was looking forward to the most, and I'm still mostly there, even if Utah has me a little concerned.
Agree with everything that's been said. Season defining game for Utah. Desperation, continuing the theme. Backed into a corner, you're going to have an average season if you lose this game. If you're not totally out of the Pac-12 race, but you'd need a bunch of weird stuff to happen to get into the championship game for Utah. So this is it. After winning the Pac-12, going to the Rose Bowl last year, and returning 19 starters, I believe, if memory serves. This is the game that determines whether you maxed out last year, hit your head on the ceiling, and that's it for this group. I don't mean for the program, but with all these guys that they weren't able to elevate past what it was last year. Got to win this game, and I think they will do it. I'm like you, Bill, after watching them, more questions. This is more about it being desperation, USC's biggest test, SC schedules barely in the top 100 of the country. We saw them struggle offensively on the road in what will be a similar environment when they were in Corvallis. So I'm going to go with Utah and offer the caveat that I mentioned on Wednesday. If USC wins this game, they will be undefeated without question going into UCLA, and they'll be right in the mix. So this is a season. This is a pivotal point in the season for both. Utah to salvage its season relative to expectations, and USC to guarantee a virtual lock to be in the playoff mix until that rivalry game against UCLA. All gets determined in front of the mighty Utah student section on Saturday, and I will say that the Utes hand Lincoln Riley his first loss as the head coach of the Trojans.
All right, boys, who are we locking up as we head out the door here?
What do we know about Will Levis right now? He's got to play, right? It sounds like he's been practicing.
I think that for Bill's curiosity about Will Levis, that there'll be some information coming out in the 24 hours before the game. There's much more optimism. He was never playing last week. They had game planned all week for Kaya Sharon to go. I do think there's a little more optimism generally this week at Kentucky, and that those investors before placing your hard-earned shekels on that game should watch closely Friday night and Saturday for the latest on Levis.
Yeah, I think what I heard, it sounded like he was practicing as of about Tuesday, and that's usually kind of even if they're going to play all their cards close to their best moving forward, I think that's probably a pretty good sign. So I'm going to take that leap of faith and say that if Levis is playing, he's not scrambling all that much this year anyway. He's just hanging in the pocket and making throws. And if he's in there, then Mississippi State is not 7 points better than Kentucky. That's going to be my I assume that line, if or when it is cleared that Levis will play, that line will not be 7 anymore, but it has been for most of the week. And so I'm going to lean on that.
Pete, you want it? You want me to go?
Go ahead, Rece.
Okay.
I'm searching.
I'll stay in the SEC for my lock as well. I'm going to say that Ole Miss is a lock to cover the spread against Auburn. Auburn they can't score, and then eventually they get worn down. And not that coaches necessarily keep up with these types of things, but I don't think Lane has beaten has beaten Auburn yet. So there have been some wild games. They've had some misfortune here and there. Auburn has owned the series, but Auburn is reeling. They're pretty good on defense. They'll probably make it tough on Ole Miss to run for a while, but that number is only, I think it's only like 14.5. And I mean, are they really going to keep Ole Miss at home from scoring 31? And I don't think they are. So I'm gonna say that Ole Miss remains undefeated and beats Auburn for the first time under Lane, and that's the lock to cover that number.
After what we saw last week from Kiffin, I can only think of one rationale for them trying to score in the final minute against Vanderbilt, and it pushed them over a certain number in the scoring margin there, and so it sounds like that he might be a good guy to lean on with a lock at the moment. If they need another touchdown late, they're probably going to get it.
Yeah, Auburn is like, they've had 4 straight games where they haven't scored 20. The last time they did that was year 1 post Cam, when they fell off a cliff after that. And I mean, it's their offense has been difficult and painful to watch.
Speaking of difficult and painful, that has been my process of attempting to pick a lock of the week. But I believe that I have found it. There's an interesting matchup in the AAC on Saturday night. Memphis at East Carolina. East Carolina has had just some of the worst luck. They could well be 5-1. In Memphis, quite frankly, has had some good fortune, and they roll in there at 4-2. East Carolina is a 5-point favorite at home. I feel like this is the game that East Carolina, where everything comes together for them. That's a rowdy environment at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium. Memphis comes in reeling off that Friday night loss. Like that's the kind of loss that can break a program and a coach's tenure. So I feel like East Carolina can feast on the vulnerable Tigers, and Memphis had shown some vulnerabilities heading into that game. Now they dominated it for 52 minutes, but I have not been sold on the Tigers, so I'm going to take the Pirates to run away.
The last time I was in Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium, young offensive coordinator for the Pirates didn't quite get the clock managed properly down the stretch, allowed UCF one more possession, and UCF won on a walk-off Hail Mary. Young Lincoln Riley was the offensive coordinator for Ruffin McNeil.
Never heard from again.
Whatever happened to that guy and his
Greenville South High School?
All of his offensive wizardry since has come to be.
Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium's a legit good environment. Would you agree with that, Rece, from calling that game there? I'm sure you've been there a bunch.
Absolutely. They're wild in all sports. My son played over there in baseball a couple of times too.
Oh.
You think their football crowd is wild? Their baseball crowd, they've got dudes with traffic cones on their heads sitting out in the outfield yelling at people. It's wild over there.
I'm sure they love Duke there too. I mean, just culturally,
they do. The purple Pirates have been a bit of a conundrum for the Blue Devil baseball program, though CD did take one of their dudes yard this year. So, not that I'm bragging or anything, but
how about that? A little dad humble brag on the pod.
No humble. I just flat brag.
To say, yeah.
You'll know how it is when young Teddy starts swinging that bat and putting him over the fence. That's there's not much quite like it, Pete. I'm telling you.
Teddy is profiling as a DH at this point. I don't even know if he could catch.
Oh, you're selling him short. Center field is in his future, tracking down everything, I'm sure.
He can't even crawl. He's so fat. So
free safety. Okay, well, maybe we play him.
We're not going to turn him into Mookie Betts quite yet.
Okay, how about maybe we'll play him at linebacker then?
Yeah, he should get a good score on his SAT. I think that's probably Teddy Thamel's best bet.
That's great, fellas. Good luck with the picks, at least on the ones that you made the same picks as I did. Otherwise, I hope you miss the rest of them. So,
all right, this is fun, gentlemen.
And it's been always fun. Enjoy this weekend of college football, everybody. We've mentioned a couple of times how rare it is to have this many games featuring ranked opponents, this many games featuring teams that are off to 5-0 starts or better. It's special, and it goes by quickly. We're already at the halfway point of the season, so enjoy, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.